All right, so today we are going to learn how to do math with Sig Figs, starting with rounding. So normal rounding rules will apply here. The rules that you learn in math class: 4 or less rounds the number down, 5 or greater rounds the number up. But instead of rounding to a certain place value, we're rounding to the correct number of sig figs. So in math class, you might be asked to round to the tenths or the hundredths or the whole number, but here we're going to round to the correct number of sig figs. So let's say we have the number 23.578, and I want to round to 4 sig figs. Well, I know that this number, since it has a decimal point, I'm going to start with the furthest non-zero to the left, which is the 2. That number and all the numbers to the right are significant. So right now, this currently has 5 sig figs. If I wanted to round it to 4 sig figs, I would count the sig figs. So this one's, the 2 is my first sig fig. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 7 is my 4th sig fig, right? So I would look at the number after that, the 8, and the 8, does that round it up or down? Rounds it up, so rounds the 7 up. So I would round it to 23.58, and that would now have 4 sig figs. Okay, if I wanted to round it to 3 sig figs, well, now I'd look at 23.5, 1, 2, 3, that's my 3 sig figs right here, and then I'd look at the 8. What does the 8 do to the 5? Well, rounds it up, so that'd be 23.6. Now the number has 3 sig figs. Okay, so that's basically how you're going to round it. So let's try another one. If I have the number 4,882, so that number has how many sig figs? No decimal point. Look at the furthest non-zero to the right, which is the 2, that digit, and everything to the left. So this has 4 sig figs. If I want to round that to, let's say, 2 sig figs, well, my first 2 significant figures are the 4 and the 8. So those are my first 2 significant figures. So then I look at the number behind that, which is the 8. What does that 8 do to this 8? Round it up. So I'd put 49. Now, I have to still account for these place values. So I can't just put it 49. I need to actually make it these in the right place value. So I'd add zeros at the end. So 4,900. If I just leave it as 49, that changes the number up completely. 49 is totally different than 4882, whereas 4,900 is not all that different, and it's just, we're simply rounding. So now it has 2 sig figs. Okay, so let's say we have a number 30.005. Okay, and I wanted to round that to, this has how many sig figs? Decimal point present, furthest non-zero to the left, that 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this has 5 sig figs. And so I'm going to, if I wanted to round it to 3 sig figs, so I get the 3, the 0, and that 0. So I get these. What does that, the following 0 do to it? Keep it the same. So it'd simply be 30.0. Now it has 3 sig figs. Okay, so that is rounding with significant figures. Now, what happens if we want to do some math with significant figures? This is where we have to be careful with our answers. So our answers can only be as accurate as the numbers that we're using. So what we're going to do is when we find our answer, we're going to round it to the correct number of sig figs. So let's say we have 5.75 times 13. Okay, so you're going to do that in your calculator. 5.75 times 13, and I got the number 74.75. That's my answer. Now, I need to round that answer to the correct number of sig figs. How do I determine that? Well, I look back at my original numbers, and I look at how many sig figs are in those numbers. So 5.75, that has 3 sig figs. 13 has 2 sig figs. My answer can only have, when I'm doing multiplication and division, my answer can only have the number of sig figs that the least amount of sig figs has. So I look at my two numbers, whichever one has the least amount, which in this case would be 13. So I would get, in my answer, I would get 2 sig figs. So what I would need to do then is round this number to have 2 sig figs. So I get 7 and 4, those are my 2 sig figs. Then I look at what the 7 does to the 4. 7 would round it up, so my answer would be 75. And that's how you would do it. Okay, let's try another one. So I'm going to do 15.37 divided by 2.48 equals. So how many sig figs are in 15.37? You should have said 4. And how many are in 2.48? You should have said 3. So then I do my math. 15, go over to your calculator. 15.37 divided by 2.48, and I get the number 6.19758, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so how many should our answer have? It should have the same number as the number with the least amount. So 3 is less than 4, so I'm going to get 3 in my answer. So I get the 6, the 1, and the 9. What does that 7 do to the 9? Rounds it up. So it's actually going to be 6.20. That will be my final answer. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do 350,000 times 432. So 350,000, there's no decimal point. So I look at the furthest non-zero to the right, that digit and everything to the left. So this one has 2 sig figs, and 432 would have 3 sig figs. So now I do my math. 350,000 times 432, and I get 151,200,000. Okay, so how many do I get in my answer? How many sig figs? 2 or 3? Hopefully you chose 2, because that is less than 3. So then again, the number that has the least amount of sig figs, that's how many we get in our answer. So I get 2 sig figs. So I get the 1 and the 5. What does that 1 do to the 5? Keeps it the same. So 1, 5. And then I can't get rid of all these place values. I just simply turn them into zeros. Because if I get rid of them, 15 is a lot different than 151 million. So I'm going to just simply turn them all into zeros. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there is my final answer, 150 million. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. I hope this helped. We will talk to you later.